Hello, Lou Hamilton from Audible Elegance here in Cincinnati, Ohio. My store is located on Montgomery Road in Old Montgomery. We have a website that uses our name. We also do work on Facebook, Instagram, and X. I write a monthly blog. Please enjoy that. If you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe. It's a little button down at the bottom. You just punch it. You don't pay anything for it, and you're alerted when we do new things. One of the interesting questions we get from people is whether they should buy a bookshelf speaker or a floor standing speaker. And it's not that they intend to put the bookshelf speaker on a bookshelf. Before I get into quote unquote bookshelf speakers like the Ariels here, let me talk about putting speakers on shelving. One of the biggest problems that happens when you put speakers on shelving is that the sound will go around the speaker into that box and make a sort of hollow sound. And the ideal way of solving that, is go to a public library drive where they're selling off all the books they don't want or excess books, and buy a whole bunch of books and flank the speaker with the books, sealing off that cavity. Otherwise, you'll wind up with this sort of sound coming out of that box where you put your speaker. Now, the other mistake we often see comes from the question, well, I don't have a tall enough shelf, so can I lay the speaker on their side? The answer is only if you want crappy sound. The reason being, and this is developed over time, you'll notice when you look at almost all speakers today, the speakers are vertically aligned. And the reason being is that they're making adjustments in the timing so that the sound from this unit and the bass unit reaches you at the same time. The sound begins to originate here in the woofer, so it physically, on some speakers, if it's a flat front, sits behind the tweeter itself. So they wind up delaying the signal to the tweeter so that we have an even presentation. This design from Ariel actually has a sloped front, so he mechanically aligns the drivers and does not have to put component parts in the crossover to deal with the timing issue. Teal was very good at this. There are speakers like Vandersteen who does it by staggering the drivers in behind his cloth in his cabinet. So it's vertically aligned to reach you properly at the same time. If I were to take this speaker and turn it on its side, what you would have is that the tweeter is in a shorter distance than the woofer from you, and you throw the timing completely off. If you have bookshelf speakers and want to try this and they're sitting on stands, turn them on your side and you'll just hear everything just go like, what happened, And so bookshelf speakers in today's design market should be only used in the vertical fashion, not on their sides. And of course, watch out for the hollow of the cavity itself. Now, getting into a more broad issue is whether someone should buy a bookshelf speaker, which they intend to put on stands, versus floor standers. And there's a couple things that are involved in that. Typically, bookshelf speakers can be closer to the back wall, what I call a half-plane design. Not always, but typically they can. So if you're limited on floor space and where you can put your speakers, you can take advantage of having the speaker near the back wall that improves the bass performance. If you take something that's a floor stander speaker, and here we have the Bryson speakers, which are more full range, they're designed to be away from the wall. They're equalized that way. So if you try to take something like this and stick it against the wall, you basically wind up with a very expensive car stereo system that really thumps, okay? But it's a miserable sound to live with. It's not musical at all. So that's part one of bookshelf versus floor standard, is where can you even put the speaker? Now, when you're talking bookshelf speakers, they have this inherent advantage in that the surface area that's involved in musical reproduction is fairly small. So the potential for reflections off the face of the speaker are minimized. That's why oftentimes people will select bookshelf speakers, because their ability to present an image, a sound field, typically is very, very good. However, what you typically also give up is lower frequency performance. There's a trade-off. I haven't heard yet a bookshelf speaker that can match a floor stander in terms of bass performance. So if you're looking for a more full range sound, that's where the floor standers come in, because they have the cabinet space to put the drivers in. However, depending upon the design, you're also dealing with more surface area that can be the source of reflections. So the care and setup is a bit more challenging in order to get the stereo image. But that is the fundamental nature between the bookshelves and the floor standers. There are variations and exceptions both ways, but as a general rule of thumb, that's what goes on. The other thing when you get in between floor standers and bookshelves is the sheer physical presence of the speaker in the room, and that's an aesthetic consideration. There are some households that will not tolerate the existence of something of significant size as a floor stander. And so your option, if you want really good musical performance, is to invest in a very good bookshelf. Now, the oddest thing that I ever ran into was somebody who bought a floor stander, and a family member objected to its presence. They wound up buying bookshelves. Well, there's two things. If you have small children, and they did, bookshelf speakers on stands are wonderful targets to be tipped over. They're not as stable as floor standing speakers. So that was question one. I couldn't understand that. The other thing is, if you look at a bookshelf with a stand, its footprint is essentially nearly the same as a floor standing speaker. So the desire to go to a bookshelf speaker because it's less physically present didn't quite make sense to me. It's not my money, and it's their right to choose what they want. But of course, it also increased the risk of their being knocked over by small children, particularly when you're talking the range of, say, 1 to 2, when they're using surrounding objects to stabilize as they try to stand up. At that point, if you have bookshelves, there's certain things you can do, but the most important thing is to love your child. So you may need to put the speakers away for a while until they're not using everything to get up. And that's just part of life. I had to put away my quad ESLs because I had a toddler who liked to rock them. So who do you love more, your system or your child? Hopefully it's the child. So those are some of the differences that go on. Some speakers are physically bolted to the stands, which makes them a bit more stable, less to be knocked off. Others less so. I think if you have large dogs, their ability to be knocked over, bookshelves on stands, has to be considered. Likewise, the wonderful thing about bookshelf speakers is if you have cats like myself, they're not likely to scratch and pull the grill to sharpen their claws. If you have a floor stander, you may wind up having to replace the grill cloth every once in a while. It all depends upon your animal. So these are all the sort of little non-audio things we try to think about, or maybe ask questions like, okay, how is it going to be used? Where is it going to be used? What are you going to do with it? We're not trying to run your life. We're just trying to make sure that part of your life isn't ruined by an accident that was avoidable or an event that was avoidable. So when you're looking at different designs, look at how you live, your lifestyle, and put that all into the equation. It's pretty much that simple. There you are.